Oh, oh, this is Terence McKenna, and I'm going to talk to you today about the mushroom. We don't really know where we came from. In fact, it's entirely possible that we're all just human mushrooms. I could be a fun guy. I am a fun guy, but I could also be a fungus. It's just entirely possible that we could all be overgrown mushrooms. If you've heard of the theory of panspermia, then you probably are familiar with the idea that aliens seeded us. And one time while tripping, I realized that those aliens had dawned me to be the ambassador for a new alien consciousness to arise out of human beings in their present unevolved state. Essentially what I'm telling you is that the mushroom is who should be president in 2020, not Donald Trump. You know, Donald Trump really represents this very low vibrational frequency. And persons like myself, brimming over with masculinity and such prowess, sexual mojo, and so forth. It's something that really we should consider taking into account if we're going to have a vice presidential candidate. So in other words, I'm suggesting that instead of Donald Trump, it's the mushroom and Terence McKenna on a president-vice presidential ticket for 2020. The LSD experience is religious in nature. And of course, the government gave us LSD and these mushrooms because they love us. The first time I smoked the mushroom and the first time that I snorted the LSD tabs, I found myself realizing my inner self to be divine. No other religions in the world have ever posited these revolutionary ideas, that we're all one. This new idea that no one has ever thought of before is something very revolutionary. If you've ever watched the History Channel, you'll notice that Nazis are ancient aliens. This is our true origin. And I think that my worldview is really the only one that makes sense. So, in this video, we're going to explore a presidential future of mushroom McKenna ticket for 2020. And the possibilities that you yourself can become divine by looking inside through smoking mushrooms.
You just heard from Terence McKenna. Welcome to another fantacular episode of Jay's Analysis. This time we're going to be talking about, again, globalist books and the LSD drug experience. Now, we talked a lot about MKUltra. My book is coming out soon. I'm presently working on the sequel to Esoteric Hollywood. You can still get copies of the original at Jay's Analysis. Signed copies for $30. The PayPal tab is there inside the U.S. That has done very well. I'm very thankful for 2017 being such a great year with the TV show and the book. And I think that the sequel book is going to be a lot more in-depth. It's going to be a lot more hardcore, a little different. A lot of new information. Stuff that's not on the blog. Stuff that's not obviously in the first book. We're going to go into some new arenas. And what we're going to talk about is, at least one section of the book will be Hollywood mind control, how Hollywood presents MKUltra and that kind of stuff, the reality, the fiction, separating, the wheat from the chaff. And I want to talk, though, about real, solid information as it pertains to MKUltra. And this week in the Globalist Books series, we're going to be dealing with Dr. John C. Lilly of Flipper fame. Flipper. This is the guy who made Flipper into a day tripper. One-way ticket, yeah. Quite literally, this is the guy who dosed dolphins with LSD to try to make them into assassins. I'm not joking. That's not all he did. For all you eco freaks, freako eco, he actually dosed and mind controlled children. Now, you see this meme come up a lot in conspiracy videos and different websites and whatnot. And I always wondered, well, can we find any actual reference or citation for that from one of these guys? Because obviously many of these characters, Jose Delgado, Ewan Cameron, they actually wrote books describing their techniques and process of mind control. Well, I came across this one, and yes, Dr. Lilly is one of the MK Ultra doctors, even though we're told that he worked under NASA, right? Which that's the Air Force, same, that's basically the same as the CIA in this regard. So he wasn't just working under NASA, he was actually working in covert operations for the CIA through a lot of these LSD experiments. And of course, LSD comes directly from Captain Hubbard, Sandoz Pharmaceuticals, all of these establishment organs who wanted to, Tim Leary, right, all these guys who wanted to put this out as a kind of social experiment, and then to bring these unwitting lab rats into the new Aeon. But so when we come to this weird question, though, of is there any proof of stuff like the memes and the tropes that you see in conspiracy stuff, like shattered mirrors, and does that represent the psyche, and how is that actually used in mind control? And I did find Dr. Ewan Cameron was using, at least in one of his experiments with one of the women at the Psychiatric Institute, in attempts to repattern and reprogram her, he was using Alice in Wonderland stories and mythology, and had convinced the woman that she was Alice in Wonderland. So there is some basis for that meme or trope. But what about this idea of like traumatizing children, mind controlling children? That one's a little more difficult. But once we think about the fact that, well, Alfred Kinsey was supported by the Rockefeller Foundation, and he had no qualms about molesting children for his research. When we think about it like that, it's not hard to believe that they would also engage in trauma-based mind control with children. But what's the real proof or citation from these characters that's actually happened? Well, it's in this book. Now, this book is really weird. I mean, he must have been writing this while he was tripping balls out of his mind, because it's one of the most bizarre, difficult books to try to read. I mean, a lot of it you can make sense. It's not that it's too technical or that he's that deep of a writer. It's that he uses a lot of terms and phrases, and he doesn't define them. We don't know exactly what he's talking about, and all this gobbledygook that he comes up with. But he really was doing these experiments, and he really was, of course, funded by the government. Now, the first thing I did want to talk about is the idea of, according to John C. Lilly, mirrors in mind control programming. Now, actually, he does say this. He says that the handler can place mirrors in front of people, especially if they've been in isolation tanks. Think about that terrible movie with William Hurt from the 70s, Altered States. Right, in that movie that's based on John C. Lilly, it's William Hurt, the psychonaut pioneer that's, dipping himself in the isolation tank, tripping balls, regressing to his caveman, Peking man state, and then he devolves into some sort of protoplasmic Big Bang God being. I mean, it just gets more and more ridiculous. The movie is utterly preposterous. It's quite comical, though, when he's wearing his ape suit and he's kind of running around at the end of the movie trying to get out of the zoo. But that's a different topic. Altered States is ridiculous, but this is not ridiculous, because the real John C. Lilly was not a brave psychonaut. He was a psychopath who had no qualms or morals, and dosed children and mind wiped them with LSD. And so he says on page 20, for example, within the 8 hours within the 8 hours of the LSD trip, it is possible to achieve, with the help of LSD and the use of visually projected images. So notice there, you think of Clockwork Orange with Alex being strapped down and he's forced to watch movies. That's really how it went down. He says that this can overcome defense mechanisms, and he says by means of a mirror, the careful inspection of the body in external reality, it is possible to induce a special state of consciousness in which remembered or unconsciously stored images of the self or others appear on or in place of the body image. So he's even saying, I think he's saying, this is where it's kind of confusing. We don't always know exactly what he's saying, but he seems to be saying you can convince a person that they are someone else, they have a different body. And he goes on to talk about altars and all this kind of what you would think is conspiracy mythology. He's written this scientific text about it. And it's a scientific book. I mean, it's packaged that way. We're talking, tons and tons and tons of research footnotes. And then he goes on to talk about that you can program melting, that you could cause people to see faces melt and so forth. This is obviously common in LSD and whatnot. But then he goes on to talk about people seeing gods and demons and angels, which is, again, pretty common. I remember the time that I first did LSD, unfortunately. It was a very bad experience, and I was watching... I didn't know what to expect, and was at the movies, and it was Grumpier Old Men, and so I got to see Walter Matthau's face melt. Now, Walter Matthau's face is already not the most beautiful, the most aesthetically pleasing, and a melting Walter Matthau face is even less aesthetically pleasing. I think that's what kicked off the bad trip, was seeing Walter Meltdown. But anyway, what we're going to get into in the second part of this talk is more of the bizarre details, the discussions of the trauma and the inducing the trauma-based mind control in Dr. Johnson. I mean, if you think about Star Trek IV, Voyage Home, really dumb movie. And they're talking to whales, and don't they get help from dolphins too? Maybe it's just whales, but that's all also based on this kind of idea. And the stupidity of this is, we evolved from, I guess, at some point we were like dolphins, right? So we ought to be able to communicate with our previous ancestors. And John C. Lilly and his compatriots, if you read the Guardian article in my newest article at Jay's Analysis on Hollywood Mind Control and John C. Lilly, they actually developed, how can we put this, a special relationship with Flipper. Yeah, exactly. Now, this is just the intro video. We're going to get into the heavy stuff again in hour 2, but I did want to note the madness here of these characters. And this is another one of these good books. I mentioned this book many years ago, LSD and the American Dream, Storming Heaven by J. Stevens. And he quotes on page 112 and 113 the idea of blending all religions, that the introduction of LSD would go well with ecumenism. Exactly, wouldn't it? Right. But yeah, because the people who do LSD come out of it thinking all religions are one, man. That's a brand new idea. Nobody's ever thought about it, even though every pagan pantheistic religion in the history of the world has said it. Allen Ginsberg took peyote in 1955 and began to write poetry. Looking out of his window, one day he had a vision of Moloch, the biblical idol, who demanded the burning and sacrifice of children. Ginsberg decided that America was Moloch. Yeah, it is, because what did America do right after this? It instituted the rite of abortion, which is a satanic sacrifice of the offspring of America. And you could count fake wars in that too. And so Howl, the poem by Ginsberg, is actually about Moloch, the cry of Moloch, and the crowd chanting along with him. And again, I don't think it's accidental that Ginsberg is talking about Moloch, and America becomes the championing force in the world for abortion and spreads that idea to other countries. We will also touch a little bit on Walter Boert's classic book, Operation Mind Control, another one of the sort of well-known books that deals with LSD, drugs. Another good book that, from a leftist perspective, but it's still a lot of good information in this book, is John Potash's Drugs, Weapons Against Us. And there's some details that he covers that I wasn't aware of, one of which is this interesting character, as I said, an early promoter of LSD from the military. Oh, the military loves you so much. That's why they give all your kids LSD. Captain Hubbard, government agent, promoted LSD throughout the world for supposedly good reasons. Now, who did Captain Hubbard give LSD to? My job was to sit on the couch next to the psychiatrist and put the people through LSD, which is what I did. These targets were, according to Potash, many pop figures and pop stars and singers, such as, a lot of people from the 60s, right? Researcher Martin Lee says that Hubbard gave LSD to thousands of people, from individuals in the Vatican, priests, and then he introduced it to philosopher Alan Watts, researchers Sidney Cohen, and Keith Dittman and Arthur Chandler. And then Hubbard, this is way before the 60s stuff, the LSD went to Jack Nicholson. My wife Wendy's a confirmed horror film fanatic. Jack Nicholson, James Coburn, Cary Grant. Cary Grant was a big tripper. Did you know that? Cary Grant was a big tripper. So again, a lot of interesting tidbits that we're going to cover in Potash's book. It'll just impart in the next section here. Thank you for watching this video. Please share it. As you know, my stuff is Mark Zuckerberg's not a big fan, I guess, of Jay's analysis anymore. I don't know if he ever was, but the algorithms and the bots, pimp bot working for Facebook now is trying to undermine me. So Mark Zuckerberg sent pimp bot after me. But you can, of course, watch my show, Hollywood Decoded, at Gaia.com. And hopefully, if enough of you sign up and continue to sign up, and now that we are on Charter, Xfinity, and Google Play, and some other, Amazon Prime, obviously have been for a long time, there's a good chance there'll be a season 2. So anyway, this is the first half. If you want to see the rest of this talk, which will be upwards of an hour, 2 hours, go to jaysanalysis.com and subscribe for $4.95 a month, or for $60 a year. You get access to the archives and all of the information there. Thank you for watching. And again, please share this information, because the Silicon Valley pimp bots are coming to collect. And I am a rebellious hoe from my pimp. Pimp bot's after me. So help me defeat pimp bot by sharing my stuff.